Good evening. All right, we can do a little bit. I'm in church. Good evening. Thank you. I know we've all had a Monday, I am pretty sure. Traffic was probably a time. So thank you all for being here this evening. My name is Brittany Irby. I am the director for the Office of Neighborhoods and Community Engagement for Mayor Freddie O'Connell. And so I have been tasked with giving the welcome this evening. So I've just got a few remarks for you all this evening. One, give yourselves a hand. This is the first of many community conversations that we plan to have. So thank you for joining us. So our mayor wants to ensure that when tough issues arise, we're able to come together as a community, openly talk about it, ask questions, and engage in the issues honestly. So these conversations are to ensure that you hear all the facts, right? So you can make informed decisions. And so I am also in that camp. As a Nashvilleian, I am looking forward to hearing all the facts so we can all leave here a little bit more educated about the topic and feel like we are informed. So with that being said, you're probably saying, Brittany, what can we expect from the evening? So we're going to hear a little bit of history from Dave Rosenberg right after I step off, and then we will have a presentation from Metro Nashville Police Department. With that, then we will pivot to the Community Review Board. We will have community partner presentations if there are any. Don't worry, there will be some Q&A. And with that being said, did anybody get cue cards or index cards yet? No? So you might see me fluttering around. We will make sure that you have index cards. So as questions arise, as you listen to the presentations this evening, feel free to write down your questions. And during the Q&A that my colleague, that Brian Sexton, will host, we will address some of those questions for you. So as you have them, as you write them down, just raise your hand throughout the presentations. I'll come grab that from you. And then after Q&A, we will wrap it up with closing and next steps. Sound good? All right, last but certainly not least, to my left, we've got interpreters in the house, so one, thank them for doing what they're doing. But if that, I know that they are actually physically speaking and making sure that everyone is able to understand and hear us this evening. So if you want to shift seats, the option, we've got a few up here, but just wanted to make sure that I called to attention that they're in the house this evening. So with that being said, Dave Rosenberg.
Good evening. Thanks, y'all, for being here tonight. I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we got here on license plate readers. It's been a long and winding road over the last 8 years on license plate readers. I need to speak louder. Is that better? Okay. So the Metro Council has gone through a lot of legislation related to license plate readers that have brought us here today. First, in June 2017, Metro Council voted 25-2 on a bill related to surveillance in general. It created our first surveillance policy in Metro Nashville, and it included an outright ban on the use of LPRs by Metro government, except for a use related to emissions testing that never went into effect. 4 years later, the emissions testing provision was modified, but again, we never did emissions testing via LPR, and we don't have emissions testing anymore, so that went by the wayside. Then, after a great deal of debate and a few years off a lot of people's lives, the council voted in February of 2022, 22-14, to allow the use of LPRs, license plate readers, by law enforcement, and that was started with a 6-month pilot program. So the idea was that the LPRs would be used for 6 months, and then the council would reevaluate based on the results there whether to continue with the program or not. Then following that, from March until August of 2022, Metro Council had another slew of LPR bills. The council voted unanimously in support of bills ensuring the COB had access to the program data and added some definitions that were missing from the legislation. Voted 32-1 to exclude immigration enforcement as an allowed use, and voted unanimously to exclude abortion enforcement as an allowed use. Then, after the pilot program and another delay, in August of 2023, right at the end of last term, the council voted to make permanent 24 to 14 the permanent approval of the LPR program. So at this point, there are still no LPRs because the council would still need to go through another step of actually approving contracts with a vendor. And that brings us where we are today and deciding where we move forward from here. So as Brittany said, we'll start with presentations by MNPD and CRB and go from there. So if y'all would like to begin, please come on up. Thank you.
More history. Evening. I'm Lieutenant Ricky Huddleston with MNPD. I work in Crime Control Strategies Bureau. To my left here is Captain Stephen Duncan. He was the program manager and the captain over the Investigative Support Division. With me, additionally, I've got Michelle Coker, the lieutenant over our OCOP office. I greatly appreciate everyone being here to be part of this conversation. Oop. So this is a conversation. This has been going on for a while. I've been on the project for about 2 years, running the day-to-day of this. I've been in law enforcement, working in another department before I came here. Started at Lebanon Police Department in 2001. From Lebanon Police Department to here, this is one of the most impressive technologies that I've seen in my 23 years of law enforcement. Let me get started. So, the program goals of the I pace and I move around, so So the program goals for the license plate reader were to, does it work? I will say that the LPR technology has been around since 1976. It was developed in Great Britain. The first stolen car was recovered in 1981. It's older than I am. So the technology has been around for a while. So some of the other goals that we're trying to determine from the pilot is, does the ordinance meet the community needs? Does the MNP policy provide effective controls? And what are the best ways to deploy the LPRs? Can the MNPD handle adequate management of the program? And which vendors should we use? Like David mentioned earlier, we are in the contract negotiation phase, so we are developing and determining which vendors we are selecting at this time. So, you can barely read it. These are some of the impacts that we've had from the LPR recovered vehicles. I was personally involved with the first one. Every historical research I had to physically approve. Read each one of them, made sure it fit the ordinance, made sure we went through the proper procedures. But that one I'm especially proud of. This Indiana college student, her hometown has LPRs. She came here to enjoy downtown. 2 individuals abducted her and sexually assaulted her around Nashville. We had an image of their car. Based on that image and the use of the LPRs, we were able to identify them and coordinate with Chattanooga police to apprehend them. They were identified and arrested. Not only LPRs here, but LPRs in Chattanooga. As well as, like it mentions Clearwater, Florida. That was the furthest vehicle that was recovered. We had some recovered from, or stolen in, like Austin, Texas, Houston area, and recovered here. But that one's around 800 miles away that was recovered here. So it's a national system. the results of the program. So we ran the program from January 22nd to July 22nd. It was a 6-month LPR program. It took about a month to get all the cameras installed, all the signage up, everything up and running. So in 5 months, $1 million worth of stolen vehicles recovered. 14 guns were taken off the street. The youngest person arrested, there was 112 that were arrested. The youngest person was 13. The oldest was in their 60s. But to bring your attention to 87 vehicles and $1 million worth of recovered property. That averages out to be about $12,000 per car. This isn't your Teslas getting stolen. It's not a Land Rover. This is vehicles that I drive. Anyone in this room would drive. It's a $12,000 car. All right, go ahead. Some of the definitions. The camera reads. So it is a photograph camera. It's not a recording camera like you see in this room. It takes a picture of it. The computer inside the system looks for letters and numbers. Those letters and numbers are compared to NCIC. That's when you get into hit notification. NCIC is National Crime Information Center, is a database of all the stolen cars, wanted persons, missing persons, Amber Alert. That is a national database that it compares it to. It looks for those letters and numbers, take those letters and numbers, compares it to that. If there is a match, it's like this is close enough a match, we need human interaction to confirm that this is exactly what we're looking at. This is a stolen one. That's where we get the hit notification. Hit notification is that confirmation that is needed from the officers. A verified hit is when they receive that hit notification and the two officers in the room look at each other, they look at the state, the plate, the vehicle, the tag, and confirm that this NCIC entry is one that we need to do something further on. We need to notify the officers on the street to go look for this car. They generate a BOLO, be on the lookout for. That is a verified hit. Okay. So again, kind of the process, the camera reads it, that letters and numbers, compared to NCIC, get a hit notification, this needs human interaction. Then it goes to dual verification. The two officers said yes, this is everything matches. This is a stolen vehicle. Yep, stolen vehicle. The state, the plate, the letters and numbers, they all match. Let's send it out to the officers on the street to go find it. That's all this is. It is generating a call for service to go look for that car. All right. This is an actual hit that we received. That car is stolen. That is the image that we get that the officers run that tag. It's a stolen vehicle. It has the plate, the vehicle, and we look at it. BLW 6116. We run that ourselves through NCIC. If it's a local report, we pull the report. What are the circumstances of the stolen vehicle? What information can we provide to get officers in that area? Chief Drake's, one of his 3 core pillars is precision policing. This program is the definition of precision policing. 71 million tags approximately were ran in the 24 locations around the city. Out of those 71 million reads, 112 people were arrested. Of those 112, 103 have been arrested before. That means 9 people have never been arrested in Davidson County. So the question comes up in our office, what can we do for those that have never been arrested here to ensure that they don't repeat this again? What services are needed, such as that 13-year-old that needs resources to not commit a violent offense? Hit and run crashes. So approximately since August to December, about 3,000 hit and runs in Davidson County. 40 of those serious bodily injuries. You notice at the bottom, 10 fatal crashes involve pedestrians. 8 are still unsolved. Go ahead. These are instances of those 8. These are 3 instances where an LPR could help. The map up here, we've got locations where we would like to see the LPRs based on community conversations we had previously in the month of January and February. I want to bring your attention to the one at the bottom, Murfreesboro and Thompson. We had an LPR there. We had a license plate reader there at that location. We've got video that recorded at the intersection from a PD safety cameras. We have the investigator pulled video from a WeGo bus. Neither one of the videos or the businesses around captured the plate of that vehicle. That is still unsolved. But we had an LPR there at that intersection. This happened after they were taken down. So these are the hit and runs, the serious bodily injuries, and the next slide would be just the fatal crashes. So Dickerson Pike, Haywood Lane, Murfreesboro and Thompson, Andrew Jackson, Old Hickory Boulevard. These are our high traffic areas. You see a couple intersections like Firestone Parkway, Old Hickory Boulevard, Lebanon and Sweden. Same thing with Gallatin and Harris, like multiple pedestrians. I know as part of the mayor's drive to move forward, choose how you move, like it is, these conversations be had, like how to protect the citizens as they get off the bus, as they walk to the bus stop, the pedestrians in these corridors. So during the pilot, the city was divided up within quadrants. Those quadrants were based off of population density. So you notice quadrant A, you can see it over here in this map as well, it is everything north of Cumberland River. It's less populous in that quadrant than it is in the other 3 quadrants. But you have, in a 5-year period, 26% of the calls for service came out of quadrant A, 23, 21, 27 in each of the respective quadrants. It's like quadrant A is 38% of the total area, but 23% of the population. Quadrant C is the most dense. The quadrant we are in right now is the most densely populated area. So taking that population density map, the city was divided into quadrants based on population density. Looking at the violent crime between January 21 to 22 and comparing that to the intersections, 50% of the violent crime that occurred across the entire county were within half a mile of about 47 intersections. So for the pilot, how do we narrow that down? So we looked at the violent crime density around the city, and we identified the intersections where an LPR would be beneficial. Go ahead. The violent crime that was looked at, homicides, gun violence, robberies, assaults, this is what it looked like. Go ahead. So from those 47, it had to be balanced amongst the quadrants. Each quadrant got a total of 6 LPRs, locations, to total 24 sites across the county. So $1 million recovered at 24 locations. This is the violent crime hotspots. What was used to determine, you got to think half a mile within the hotspots, the nearest intersection, that's what helped determine it. The next one. These are the sites that were used during the pilot, the 24 locations, and it was a little washed out with the sunlight, but you can see the highest density within those locations. Okay. So the city council policy was extremely well written. It gave us clear guidance and guidelines to maintain. It gave us guardrails to protect the authorized uses: gun violence, homicides, assaults, stolen vehicles, stolen plates, traffic offenses, the street racers that run up and down Antioch Pike, Murfreesboro Pike. It could be used to identify them, and our traffic division utilized it often. Because with those street racers, traffic offenses such as hit and runs, but with those street racers come the violence. They have guns, they have drugs, and people are getting hurt. Missing and endangered persons, silver alerts and amber alerts. So these are the authorized uses for the LPR pilot. The equipment we had, 24 locations, they all had to be solar powered, they all had to be fixed, placed in an intersection covering all lanes of travel, had to use cellular. We had 10 patrol vehicles with LPRs mounted on them, 3 on the car, so look in the front, 2 in the front and then 1 in the rear. And we had 7 portable trailers. Everything had to be solar powered, had to be mobile. So this is quadrant A, based on the placement and the crime. Looking at Gallatin, OHB, 161, Trinity and Brick Church, 170 crimes within that year. Quadrant B, it is, let's see, Harding Place, 286, and then Murfreesboro and Thompson, 302 violent offenses in that time. Quadrant C, Hermitage and Fairfield, 363, and then quadrant D, First Avenue South at Korean Veterans, 670 violent offenses within a half a mile of there. Right. See the quote by Greg Claxton. Generally, with the data provided, we do find the LPRs are located in census block groups with a higher share of people in poverty and people of color, but also a much higher share of major intersections and violent crime. While not determinative, this suggests LPR placement focused on violent crime hotspots and major streets. Go ahead. The home sale price, see it there, you can take a picture of it, of the low end and the high end. Davidson and Trinity went up 1.8 million as opposed to 2.2, the next one. Like I mentioned previously, the ordinance was precise on the language, the verbiage. David mentioned immigration status. It does not send it to us. We do not receive, it prohibits us from utilizing it for immigration status. The LPR data is deleted after 10 days, and only 10 employees have access to it. Everything that is run, I had to approve. Captain Duncan, he doesn't have access to it. Only those utilizing the system can. So I've had it up here the whole time, but this is the camera map. It is a total coverage picture of what we would like to see. This is based off of community conversations. This is based off of what the officers like, what the what the data says, where we would like to place it. We started at the county line and worked our way in. If we were wanting to put it and affect every person across the county, it's like these are the camera locations, and have those conversations about what that looks like. That's why I enjoy these conversations. Go back to the phone. No, I'm sorry. Next one. That one, yeah. So, like I said, the previous one was a total coverage map of 160 camera locations across the city. This right here is a coverage map utilizing major intersections and supporting documentation. So what we did, we took the conversations we had at the community meetings, we took recommendations from the mayor's office, and we looked, what does the data tell you? So quadrants were divided by the LPR pilot, equal population density. The matrix we used were community recommendations, locations, and we used the Nashville DOT major and collector street plan to identify those major roadways. Utilizing an updated violent crime heat map where the intersections where the crime occurs. And also one of the comments came up is like, where is the traffic? So we utilize the DOT, Tennessee DOT, what is the average daily traffic? So the locations we have are based off of high traffic intersections, high crime intersections, and we support those intersections. So Lebanon OHB, we make sure that one is covered, and then we do north, south, east, and west from that intersection. One thing we learned from the pilot was that you have to have that updated constant input. It hit this location, and it hit this location. We know the vehicle is traveling this direction. If it hits this location and doesn't hit this one, then we know it's somewhere in this area. That's how we had the success that we did. So this is the major intersections and supporting location based off of 6 matrices that we can back up with the data. So I think that's the next one. We're out of time? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We're out of time. We had a video. It's 2 minutes. It's a news article. But yeah, we're good. Do you have anything to input, say?
There'll be time for questions after, so.
Absolutely.
We respect everybody's time, so we have time to answer the questions.
All right. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Oh, that's loud. Hello, everyone. My name is Dylan DePriest, and I'm the policy analyst with the Metro Nashville Community Oversight Board, and Community Review Board after recent state legislation. And I'm joined by my colleague, our Assistant Director, Anthony Johnson. And today we'll be talking about LPRs in Nashville. So this is briefly what we'll cover today. We want to start with a little bit of an introduction on LPRs in general. Then we're going to go into 3 important topics when we talk about what LPRs mean for the community here in Nashville: placement, perspective, and policy. And then finally, we will wrap it up with a conclusion. All right, so to begin, what are LPRs? So LPRs are automated license plate readers that take pictures of automatic cameras. I'm getting feedback here. Automatic cameras that take pictures of vehicles that pass through them. Is this better? Cool. I think I might just go ahead and keep it here then. All right. So once those vehicles pass through that camera, that license plate reader gets turned into a series of numbers and letters, and those numbers and letters get read through a crime database. The one MNPD is using is the NCIC, or the National Crime Information Center. And this is important because this is a federal database that collects information from law enforcement agencies nationwide. So, while LPRs are designed for use around vehicle-related crime, the reality is vehicles tell a lot about a person's daily habits, especially in America and Nashville, which is very car-centric. So, while LPRs do have the strong potential to help improve public safety and address crime, they also increase the surveillance apparatus of Nashville, which, again, is overwhelmingly car-dependent, and with someone's vehicle history, where they're coming and going, you can learn a lot about someone and their particular habits. So this information, while again very important for addressing public safety and crime, also has the potential to carry a lot of information about the innocent folks living their day-to-day lives in Nashville. And while this has not been the case with MNPD in the pilot program, it's very important to note that it's been misused in other cities across the country, especially for stalking or learning about people's political or racial habits or demographics. So, additionally, certain LPR vendors implicated in the pilot program have fallen in hot water in other states for sharing data outside of the programs into nationwide repositories where folks can buy that data and use it once again to locate where people are coming and going by their license plate data. So it's important to note that there are no federal policies governing LPR use. However, Nashville does have a strong local policy, which we'll talk about later in our presentation, with 13880, which provides some crucial guidelines and safeguards for moving forward with LPRs in Nashville. So, a little bit about the pilot program. It ran for 6 months from February to July of 2023. Using data from that pilot program, NCRB, formerly MNCO, again, state legislation changes, released a report on that pilot program. And that's what I'll talk about today. So with that data, we ended up analyzing it. And if we go to the next slide, one of our big topic points is the placement of these LPRs. So here is a map of Nashville with the different LPRs placed on it, with the different quadrants color-coded as so on the right in the legend. And when we look at that placement on the next slide, we can see that this placement overwhelmingly follows racial and income demographic information in Nashville based on 2020 U.S. Census block data. And so if we go to the next slide, when we look at it at zip codes, it might be hard to tell since there's a lot of information going on here, but this is the breakdown of LPR locations by zip codes. And so using that placement data, we ended up pulling the data from MNPD's public dashboard on the LPR enforcement statistics, which were hits, vehicle stops, vehicle or driver searches, arrests, and vehicle recoveries. And we'll define those in just a minute. But then those categories were mapped over the racial and poverty base map of Nashville. And so these are the categories here. I won't get too in the weeds with them because we are limited on time, but these are the various steps that we'll go through today. So before we get into the data, a brief overview is that while the LPRs were placed with an equal amount of LPRs in each section, we found that there was a disproportionate amount of LPR enforcement activity in Quadrant A, which represents North Nashville, East Nashville, and Madison. And so while that LPR activity was concentrated in Quadrant A, we used what's called a base rate analysis to map that activity versus more general forms of MNPD vehicle enforcement activity to compare. So it's less of comparing apples to oranges and more how this new technology already relates to existing MNPD practices and records. And so first here we'll talk about where the vehicles recovered from. So most of the vehicles recovered in the program were once again in this Quadrant A right here. And you can tell by the brighter the color is, the higher the frequency is on the map. And so when we go to the next slide, this is what we were talking about with that base rate analysis. So while most of that LPR activity is concentrated in Quadrant A and around certain LPRs, MNPD general vehicle stops tend to cover all of Davidson County and follow traffic and population patterns here. Because after all, crime, especially vehicle-related crimes, are happening all across Davidson County. And if we go to the next slide, when we start looking at LPR enforcement activity by each topic, we can see that when it comes to the verified hits, once again, they're overwhelmingly concentrated in that Quadrant A, with also some concentration in, I believe it was between quadrants B and C down in southeast Nashville. And then when we look at the next category, Also, sorry if I'm squinting, it's really bright. When we look at the next category, driver or vehicle searches, we can see that those trends still stay the same, constant across these different topics. Although the frequency then in the southeast portion of Nashville fades a little bit and gets more intense over in that quadrant A. So vehicle searches and the following variables, those are the actual enforcement activities that are taking place via LPR activity. So from driver vehicle searches, it goes to arrests, once again, the same trend. And then if we go to the next one, oh, sorry, that was the last one. So placement, we think, is really important when it comes to LPRs, because after all, the folks that are receiving LPR enforcement activity are the folks driving through the LPRs, which, once again, were disproportionately placed in low-income and non-white areas. So for the full program, since we all want the same goal here, public safety for Nashville and its community, we really want to make sure we can work with MNPD to have the placement for the 106 expected fixed cameras to really and truly be equitably distributed across Nashville. And since then, MNPD has hosted community sessions around Nashville. I went to many of them, and I think this was a really great step forward in getting that community feedback and figuring out what equitable placement really looks like for Nashvillians and the citizens and MNPD as well, so that they can do their jobs to the best of their ability. And so if we go to the next slide, it's funny, I have a picture here from one of those meetings, but there's a much better map here. And so already when we look at this map, I don't have the exact location data to do another heat map with it, but from a surface level analysis, this map, I believe, matches traffic patterns and general population patterns of Nashville better than the pilot program did. So I do think this is a strong step in the right direction for making sure we have equitable placement of this technology across Nashville. And so I think with the pilot program, while crime statistics are a really useful metric for, determining where crime is happening across Nashville, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best metric to go on for surveillance technology, as that, once again, crime data can carry some historical biases of certain communities, and when we want to focus on equitable placement, we think moving beyond just crime stats. But of course, you can't fully move past them. They are important too. But focusing on building crime stats into a more encompassing apparatus with things like traffic patterns, population patterns, and the like. And so next we'll talk a little bit about perspective. If we go to the next slide. Since we are going to have LPRs in Nashville, once again, we really want to make sure that this is a tool that both MNPD feel comfortable using and citizens who are going to be the ones driving through them day in and day out. And again, while LPRs are a very useful tool for apprehending criminals and those committing crimes, it also is, once again, a surveillance technology, which is always important to think about when we talk about things that relate to freedom of movement, the First and Fourth Amendment, and the right of privacy for our citizens. And so, to assess a little bit about how the community felt about LPRs, NCRB, once again, formerly MNCO, released a survey to members of the Nashville community. And so from there, I'll just go into the next slide. What we learned is that most folks actually have a positive opinion about LPRs, but as a technology as a whole, but when it comes to how it affects individual public safety and public trust with MNPD, those results actually skewed a little bit negative. And so what we learned from that is if we go through, we really want to focus on making sure the process of implementing LPRs in our city is as transparent as possible. And so I'll go through very fast because I don't have much time, but if you, I'll skip this and go briefly into policy. We can skip this. Once again, 13880 is a very strong policy, and MNPD, if we go to the next slide, has a very good start for their draft policy, but these are some aspects we think could be stronger to make everyone in Nashville feel a bit safer. So clearly defining NCIC hot lists, being the sole one used, specifying that MNPD will not use custom hot lists that vendors advertise, as well as having really clear communication about private LPR integration. And finally, we really want to expand on what the auditing looks like for this surveillance technology. And this will be my last point, I promise. But if we go to the next slide, we really want to focus on the language of 13880 and build a committee of all the parties involved in LPR, so the DA, the PD, the CRB, and MNPD, and ideally a representative for the community so that everyone truly feels like they're a part of the LPR process, since we are all going to be the ones going through them. That's all the time I have, so thank you so much, and I believe we're about to open it for questions.
Before we open it up to questions, which if you haven't gotten a card, we can get you one so you can write your question down. I do want to introduce one of our community partners, Joseph from the API of Middle Tennessee, to share some remarks.
Hey everyone, my name is Joseph Gutierrez, my pronouns are he, him, and I'm the Executive Director of API Middle Tennessee. We're an Asian and Pacific Islander serving nonprofit organization working towards racial justice by building community, lifting API voices, and celebrating API identities. Want to thank everyone for their time. We strongly believe that our community only thrives when we're connected, so thanks for taking the time to connect, share your thoughts and opinions on this. I do want to share some of our concerns from our community and some of the community listening sessions we've kind of heard. And a lot of the data here presented today did a lot to kind of address those concerns too, but still ongoing, we are really concerned with the use of data, particularly for our community. Surveillance doesn't always equate to safety, and I'm just a generation removed from martial law in the Philippines, of which my mom fled in 1986. So really thinking about what that kind of means for our community. And sort of really thinking about how that usage kind of happens. It's nice to see that there's a commitment towards not sharing data with ICE, but as we all know here in the state of Nashville, state preemption and sort of what that means for us as a city is something we still constantly have to worry about. Second, we also really think about our community is also really concerned with government spending. And so really wanting to think about, it's a really cool story to hear about trying to catch people who have hit pedestrians, but our community would also be wanting to think about, how do we create safer streets, like sidewalks, better lit areas, and bike lanes. So those are just, our ongoing concerns and really thinking about what this kind of means to us. So we're really grateful for everyone here and sharing their thoughts, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Sorry about that. I'm a church kid, so I'm used to talking loud. It's all good. My colleague, Brittany Irby, will collect your questions that you are writing on your cue card. We'll read them and get you a response, all right? So, the first question, what if a fake plate is put on a stolen car? Can the Tennessee state government force Nashville to share the data?
If a fake plate is put on the car, can you hear me? Yeah. I'm hoping this works. Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. So, like we mentioned, the camera of the system only looks. It takes a photograph of it, and the computer looks just for letters and numbers. So those letters and numbers, if they can be read and scanned through the system, then the fake plate can be read with an LPR. So it is just looking for letters and numbers. So as far as, what was the other question?
Can Tennessee state government force Nashville to share the data?
Like, that would be...
Off the top of my head, I don't think so.
They would have to subpoena it and go through the court process.
Yeah, but even after 10 days, the data is gone. So the likelihood that it would happen in that time frame is highly unlikely, would be my thought on it. Past that, there's no way for us to retrieve it. I can't imagine if there's any way for anybody else to get it.
Sure.
It's my perspective that would be highly unlikely. After 10 days, like Lieutenant Huddleston was saying, the data is deleted. So anything on the federal government that would happen or state, if they were trying to subpoena anything like that, the data would already be gone. There's not a way for anybody to go back and get it, including us.
We'll go to our next question. That's a good question. Good question. Why does NCRB believe that the LPR surveillance program will harm residents?
Again, that's a very good question. First of all, we would like to thank the council and Mayor O'Connell for providing Nashville citizens an option. Nashville has a very interesting storied history with some of its policing strategies. And LPRs is part of that. But then to dig a little deeper, we have some concerns in terms of industry standards that are not necessarily being followed here in Nashville in terms of LPRs, especially with regards to the industry standards with LPRs deal with a cloud-based system, and Nashville is still using more of a server-based system. And we have concerns with that. That allows MMPD to delete data or potentially delete data or information at their will versus having the transparency that Dylan brought up in his presentation in terms of if it is cloud-based, if there's anything manipulation with the data, there would be an auditing log and things of that nature. And that transparency is critical. The technology itself, I mean, it speaks. You know, you want people to have better tools because we want better outcomes. The history, though, you can't ignore that human beings make errors, and there's a pattern in practice that we just can't afford to ignore when it comes to this technology.
Next question. I have a camera generating 10,000 reads per week. When and how can I share these reads with MMPD so that they can be alerted to NCIC hits in our neighborhood?
At this time, per the city ordinance, we will not be sharing any of our data outside of the MNPD. It is a completely enclosed system, as far as I know, there's no discussion of sharing that with any outside agencies or incorporating any other privately owned LPRs into our system. Those are future conversations that are not currently happening.
Next question. When and how do you plan to partner with private entities, HOAs, businesses, to utilize existing LPR camera infrastructure across the city?
I'll refer back to the other answer.
Excuse me, can we comment on that? Because the concern is legitimate. People want to feel safe. I think in certain instances, communities have purchased private LPRs. The reality, though, is they're using LPRs to solve a problem or to solve the wrong problem. If people want to feel safer in their homes, maybe purchasing the camera, the door cameras, and things of that nature may be a better option. There's a risk, a slippery slope here in terms of, in the law, the current policy doesn't address it, but it opens up Pandora's box in a sense, and it doesn't fully address the overall safety concerns, which you could almost tie back to the lack of policing that a community has received. People feel unsafe. Let's address that directly in a different way other than the use of LPRs and things of that nature. So.
If I could address that as well. Hi, everyone. Michelle Coker, Office of Community Outreach and Partnerships. I know it's just OCOP, but Office of Community Partnerships. I agree with you 100%. I think that the LPRs are a tool, and sometimes private citizens, as we know, I was a COCO at Midtown Hills. If you're not sure what the COCO is, it's Community Affairs Liaison. And that was between the time of 2016 to the end of 2019. There were some, I'm going to say community members. I don't really like saying citizens a lot. Community members that actually purchased their own. So they actually have access to that data. We didn't try to access that data by any means. That it's theirs. That's, like he just said, that's a slippery slope. There's other tools and resources that we can do to help, and police should be a small fraction of community safety. We're there, but we want to empower communities to do things. So we want to understand what the issues are, how we can improve community safety, public safety as a whole for everyone. I agree with him. Private community members, businesses having their own LPR systems can be a little detrimental, could be a little slippery slope, but at the end of the day, I do feel like there are other means and ways that we can go about addressing public safety.
Moving right along. The next question. During the pilot, can you describe the amount of time it took for stolen cars to be reported to MMPD, added to the NCIC database, and then eventually recovered? Was this average amount of time less than, more than, or about the same as stolen cars during non-LPR periods?
So anybody who's called Metro Nashville knows that sometimes it takes a little while to get an officer to your door to take a report. There are steps in place right now, such as the core reporting, the online reporting, where a citizen can report their vehicle stolen through that. But still, an officer still needs to respond to verify the ownership of that, because we don't need somebody's angry brother trying to report his brother's car stolen. So we have to verify ownership when we arrive. So the goal and the aim is an hour to 2 hours of the call coming in to get it into NCIC. That is per records. That way we get the quickest information into NCIC. And as soon as it's entered, it starts notifying us. There's something called a delayed hit notification, so that if it was entered at 3 o'clock, but it went through an LPR at 1 o'clock, it would notify us because of when it was entered. So I know that Dylan mentioned something about the hot list, and that is a valid concern. The purpose of the hot list on that for the 10 members who only have access is to do to enter that license plate. It's like, yes, it's been stolen. into the hot list, so before it is entered into NCIC, so we can be notified if it hits while the officer is on the scene. That's the purpose. So, and what was the second question? How long to?
Was that?
How does it compare? Yeah. Of the, if I recall the data, I don't have it in front of me, but approximately 50% of them were recovered within the first 5 days of the car being stolen. It is just a little bit better than just officers out as currently searching for the cars, because an officer driving down the road, they have a computer in their car and they're sitting there running the tags as they see. It's like, hey, this I know was stolen earlier this day. They run the tag of the vehicles that match that description. This automates that system. So it did it a little bit faster as far as recovery, but that was prior to the Operation 72 that the city has implemented this year just to address stolen vehicles. That their purpose is to go out and look for stolen vehicles and recover them. So, but that was only at 24 locations of the 87 vehicles that were recovered. It did a little bit faster at 24 locations than on average. Go ahead.
What the license plate readers also do is, before we would get a vehicle and it may be burned out somewhere, it may be abandoned, the license plate readers allowed us to get a vehicle with, you know, an occupant or occupants in it. A lot of times the vehicle theft is part of other crimes. We would see in my previous assignment where somebody goes, they steal a car, they go to other counties, break into gun stores, pawn shops, steal weapons, and then go do robberies. So that's where a lot of the numbers that you saw from our presentation come from, is there's other crimes involved. So that gives investigators opportunity to investigate, to interview people and investigate other crimes, that gives victims closure, rather than us just finding somebody's vehicle that may be burned out. It allows us to solve more crimes.
Next question. How will LPRs help reduce street racing? Can you expand on this? How do you believe this will work?
Like I mentioned previously, traffic offenses such as street racing in excess of, you know, the speed limit and the drag racing that we see is part of the ordinance. Aaron Groen with our traffic division, he's a dedicated detective that it just focuses on street racers and identifying them. Currently, we have to rely upon citizen tips. We have to rely upon officers locating these vehicles as they damage. You know, this past Saturday night, I got a call from my wife. I was working within our safety center, and about 11:30, there was about 20 cars in my neighborhood. I live up in Old Hickory. It is quiet, it's calm, but on Hadley Avenue, there was about 20 cars doing donuts in church parking lot, just spinning tires. I know out here in Antioch, it's the same way. Nobody had a clue on who those vehicles were. When they shut down an intersection, Murfreesboro and Thompson, or Murfreesboro and Bell, nobody has a clue who those vehicles are because nobody's willing to say. With a license plate reader in that intersection who is able to identify them, they're going after them, prosecuting them at this time for inciting a riot, and they're having success with those conversations with the DA's office, and they're going after the organizers once that's been identified. So they are going after the organizers of these street races, these shutdowns, and they're having success with it. So, yeah.
Trying to make sure I don't ask the same question twice. I think this is a different one, although data has come up earlier. How will you ensure data will not be sold? And how will the government be held accountable if it is?
Like we said before, that the council was very intentional when they wrote the ordinance that gave us left and right boundaries about what data that's being shared. and we've not seen instances like that happening where data is getting sold. Again, after 10 days, the data is deleted and no longer, it's just not there anymore. So anything like that, I would imagine would be a breach of the contract and would, put a stop to the program completely. So the council, like I said, took great pains to make sure that the ordinance was drafted in a way that made it useful for the crimes that are problematic in the city, but also protected the citizens and the data that is gathered through the license plate readers.
If I can say something else on that. So I know that during the pilot, we had multiple vendors. And I don't know what the contract negotiation is looking like right now, but I know that I've had discussions with Chief Blair. And if we get contracts with these multiple vendors, if one of them doesn't want to play by the rules, if there is a breach, if it is sold, we'll drop that vendor per the contract, and we have two others that we can support, or that will still support the LPR program. So if they're not willing to secure their data or it is sold, it's like we have options instead of just going with a single vendor. And that is one of the goals that he would like to see, is like multiple vendors, so that like, hey, this one doesn't want to play by the rules, so we're going to go with these two.
Try to read this next one. Why have we taken down, approved, and installed LPRs? Second question, does the LPR data track race, political affiliation? And then third and last question, will the cameras hold with traffic patterns and flow?
All right. First question was, why was it taken down? The pilot program ended. So as part of the contract for the pilot program, they shut it down. Just removed the signs, removed the cameras. The vendors installed them, and then they took them down at the end of it. What was the second question?
Does the LPR data track race, political affiliations,
no,
personal information?
It is only what is registered. You saw the image of the vehicle. That is what it keeps track of. It will run a tag based on the letters and numbers that it reads, and if there is a hit and we are notified, it sends us that information. It doesn't send us the NCIC. We still have to run that, but it says, hey, this is one to check. It is on this database as a stolen or wanted or missing person.
Last one, the second one, we already talked about data. Okay. Why are LPRs not being used by MMPD to address property crime? We know what the policy says, but why?
Okay. Yeah.
Again, the way that the council drafted the ordinance was to make sure that it was for crimes that fit what they decided were pertinent areas and what they could be used for. But like I said, because if somebody has committed a robbery or a homicide or an aggravated assault, if we find stolen property in there, there's nothing that says that the investigation that people won't be charged with the crimes that come up during the investigation. But as far as them being used, them saying that we're going to use it for a suspicious car that was knocking on doors or something, they were concerned about the people's privacy, so they didn't deem that necessary. So I think that we still have to be the police, and we still have to go out and do our investigation and learn how to talk to people, and if there are other crimes that you investigate them fully and go through the process of obtaining a warrant or finishing your investigation.
All right, we have one more question. It says, can you discuss the internal controls and chain of command review for historical data? What training is being delivered to officers and supervisors? What is the audit process for historical data access?
All right. So part of the ordinance, there were only 10 persons that had access to the historical data. I think we only had 8 people that had access to it. We kept an internal log that only myself, Captain Duncan, and those who had access to it. We have a form that is filled out by anybody requesting the data, an internal form as well as an external form, because we did have the occasional out of county or outside of metro person requesting the data, and oftentimes we had to deny those. There was, I think, 30 denials out of 130 requests. The bulk of them were for homicides, for robberies, for shootings, for stolen vehicles. There were 2 or 3 of the missing person historical requests and a few sexual assaults. But all of that is documented and logged and categorized, that we audited every month to ensure that everyone, there wasn't any information that left our office that I myself didn't review before it was sent to the detectives. So, and then once we have a contract in place and once the vendors have been determined, then there will be something a little bit more permanent so that we can review it automatically and like up to date. But those conversations have to be had depending on which vendors we go with, because there is internal auditing with the vendors themselves. We're just trying to merge some of the data if we were to go with a multi-vendor solution as well.
All right. And I think we have maybe one more. All right. I think we've touched on this one already, but we will share again. The Community Oversight Board's report on the pilot program did not present a single complaint from anyone. Why does NCRB believe that the LPR surveillance will harm residents?
Hi, that is a great question. So one of the reasons why we didn't have any complaints directly related to the LPR program is that individuals who are arrested or stopped for LPR-related activities don't necessarily know that they are stopped or arrested for LPR activities.
All right. Any additional questions before we wrap? Just one more? Okay. All right. And as we're doing that, know that this is the first of 2 meetings. The next meeting, 3 meetings. Thank you, Councilmember. The next meeting will take place tomorrow at Southeast Community Center. And then the third and final meeting will happen on Thursday at IT Crestwell. All this information is posted, and we encourage you to participate in both of those meetings. As far as next steps, the information that you've heard this evening, as well as information that we will collect tomorrow and on Thursday, will be reevaluated with the hopes that we create a pathway forward for this program. Absolutely.
I'm just going to say one last thing. I'm going to say thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for being part of something that is important. As Dylan mentioned earlier, and I took note of that, there is historic harms and traumas that law enforcement have done, even here in our own backyard over the years, other law enforcement agencies elsewhere. Also, when we talk about the LPR systems, other cities and states that utilize this program have misused the information. So one of the things while we're here tonight is listen to you all, get feedback. Also, come to the table with our partners, you all community partners, to make sure that we hear your concerns, we hear your requests, we get your questions, and we want to get this right. The best thing that we can do is learn from other cities and states, from what they've done, their mistakes that they've made, and make sure that we are a step above and we do better and we get this right. So I appreciate every single last one of you all here tonight. Please spread the word for others to attend the other meetings like Brian mentioned, because we want to make sure, again, I can't stress that enough, that we get this right. And this is a community-centered approach. Let me make that clear. This is community-centered approach. So this is not, even though law enforcement has it, so does Metro Council, they're voting on it. So you all, your vote counts as well. So does the CRB. They'll have a stake in this as well. So thank you all for being here. Greatly appreciate it. We do understand, and I've written down some of the concerns and requests as I was listening to the CRB and just learning for myself. So thank you all.
Before we close, we do have one more question. And then, to be fair, we'll share comments from you. All right? All right, the final question of the evening. How will fake tags be addressed? All right, that's the first question. Second question, regarding street racers, how will the LPRs pinpoint which vehicles in a given area actually are racing? There can be other vehicles in the area that are shielded by traffic laws that could pass through the intersection. Will those automobiles be unnecessarily targeted?
Like other vehicles are obeying the law in the area, and how will we be able to differentiate? Right?
Okay. All right. Fake tags was the first part?
Yes, fake tags to be addressed.
All right. I think I mentioned it earlier, but it is only looking at letters and numbers. If it is a obvious fake tag like the old school tags that were like handwritten, like the temp tags, like it wouldn't read those. It would read the letters and numbers, but it wouldn't necessarily read those. It would try to run that through like the date through NCIC. As far as fake tags, it is like if they are in NCIC as being a fraudulent tag, and then that's how we'll be notified. But other than that, we would not get notified on a tag because it is only sending the data that is in that database. So we're only getting notified that is in that database. So if it is a fake tag, then if it's not in the database, we don't get notified on it. So, and the other part was street racers.
Yep.
All right. Pinpointing the identity of the vehicle and if it's being shielded by other traffic. So that's where the detective has to do his legwork. That's the short of it. So we did get hit notification during the pilot of a stolen truck that it read the last 4 digits of that car. The problem was it was pulling a trailer itself and it was blocking the first 3 digits. But the last 4 digits, letters and numbers, were entered as stolen from another state. So I say that if it cannot read the tag, then it would not pop up within the system. The detective still has to do their legwork, pulling video cameras, talking to witnesses, doing interviews to identify which tag it is. This is just a tool. It is a piece of evidence. It is not probable cause. It is a piece of evidence. All the rest of it still has to be done on the front end before anything can be moved on. So the detective, in investigating Aaron Groenwig, in investigating the street racers, they still have to do the legwork, find the videos, talk to witnesses, and figure out which vehicle exactly is to be targeted before it can be even approach the DA's office.
That being said, we'll comment.
Yeah, I'm really glad Michelle brought up comparing Nashville and especially its LPR program to other cities. And I think what we're doing here today, that's something that no other city, at least to my knowledge, across the country is doing. And I think that really deserves, a great deal of admiration for us to be here, MNPD to be here, but most importantly for you all as members of the community to be here so we can all quite literally come to the table and figure out a solution that works best for MNPD so they can tackle crime and make people feel safer, and the community members of Nashville who want to feel safe driving in their own city and knowing that their privacy is not being violated and that they too are feeling safe. So I think that us being here together and continuing to have these conversations and look at what best practices are, what policy is going to be, the best in the nation, I think we really have the opportunity here to make Nashville a shining example of what great and really equitable surveillance technology looks like that keeps our community safe. So thank you all for being here.
All right, with that being said, hopefully, yes.
That's always one more thing, right? So if anybody is like I am and you sit on things and you take the information in and say, I should have asked that one question, we've created an email box called communityconversations@nashville.gov. So if you have any follow-up thoughts, if you have any questions after this session, later after this week, please email us so we can make sure that we correspond to you and get you the answers that you need. I just wanted to make sure that I threw that out there before we bid you farewell for this evening. And if there's nothing else, thank you, Brian, for emceeing. All right, y'all have a good one.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.